Stretch it out, put on the radio voice, and here we go. Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. Just wanted to jump on here and throw up a quick episode about all this news that's been going on with the Fantastic Four. It seems like every hour or so, some more news has been breaking about, the truth behind the movie, what is on Fox's fault, what's on director Josh Trank's head, and exactly where that property is going forward. I mean, first of all, just to back it up a little bit, for those of you that haven't really been following this from the beginning, there has been a shitstorm of controversy surrounding the film. Of course, the casting of Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm upset a lot of fans for some reason, even though, I don't know, from my perspective, I didn't really think Johnny Storm had to be black or white or whatever, so based on his performance in Chronicle alone, that should have been enough to sort of ease fans' minds and let them know that he would be fine in the role, which, by the way, he was. He was perfectly fine cast in the film. What they did with his character, we'll get to in a little bit, but there was that one issue. Then there was the whole Victor Von Doom, or Victor Domashev, as he was reportedly called at one point. I've heard recently on the Fat Man on Batman podcast, which I actually mentioned on the last episode of the Crooked Table podcast, that Josh Trank actually, he actually said that that was never the name. It was always Victor Von Doom, and that was sort of a code name that they were using so that the actors wouldn't be in the mindset of, oh, I'm playing this iconic supervillain, or I'm playing this superhero, and more to bring it to a more grounded level. Whether or not that's bullshit remains to be seen. I'm a little conflicted about that because actor Toby Kebbell actually has said, in an interview that that the fans kind of heard about it, sort of implying that the fan outrage was responsible for them kind of going back and redoing that part of his character's history and his name, namely. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. Plus, not on top of that, so you had the Michael B. Jordan thing, the Victor Domashev issue, and then Josh Trank, who was at one point attached to a Star Wars spinoff. I think we all pretty much think that it was supposed to be the Han Solo one. Basically, mysteriously didn't show up for Star Wars Celebration, saying he was ill, and then was quietly sort of removed from the project thereafter. Some of the reports that I've read have said that was resulting from conflicts between him and Fox on the set of Fantastic Four, and that Disney investigated it and was basically decided to cut ties and go with a different filmmaker for their Star Wars project. Again, this is all, rumor, and one report says this and one report says this, so it might be a while before we really know everything, and the dust sort of settles on the history and the actual production of the film. Hell, who knows? One day we might see a documentary about what happened with this film, just like we have that one out now, The Death of Superman Lives, about, that Superman film in the, I think the late 90s that was supposed to come out with Kevin Smith writing it and Tim Burton directing. Nicolas Cage is Superman, obviously. But so we'll see what's happening with Fantastic Four. As for the film itself, when it came out, there were sort of, I actually read some where some people were saying it was living up to the hype, and then shortly thereafter, a flood of people being like, yeah, this is worse than we thought, we kind of going, wishing we had Michael Chiklis back in that rubber suit as Ben Grimm. But regardless, I actually have a review on the film on crookedtable.com, where I gave it 2 out of 5. And the thing is, there's a lot of material in the actual movie that totally works. In theory, works. First, let me just get that out of the way before everybody starts yelling into their computers or iPods or whatever. The film does have a lot of good things going for it, namely the cast: Miles Teller, Kate Mara, Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Bell, Toby Kebbell. I mean, those are all really strong up-and-coming actors that have proven themselves in previous films. I mentioned specifically Miles Teller and Toby Kebbell, who have played those types of characters before in Whiplash and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and things like that. They're both really strong. Toby Kebbell doesn't have nearly as much to do, unfortunately, before he disappears from the picture completely, and then later, of course, reemerges as Doctor Doom. But a lot of the elements going back and establishing the friendship between Reed and Ben early on in the film, I think that was really smart, sort of laying the foundation for the adventures that would come ahead of them, and their destiny as superheroes and all that. And they really established Reed Richards as this boy genius who has the key to interdimensional travel. And a lot of this stuff, a lot of fans have been sort of harping on the movie because it's not true. It's not true to the original comic books because it's not about interdimensional travel. It's about space travel. I'm like, well, yes and no, because it was made pretty obvious from the get-go that Josh Trank and his creative team were modeling this version of the Fantastic Four after the ultimate version of the comics. Which makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're trying to reboot a franchise that has already sort of gotten mixed at best notices from fans and critics and stuff, it makes sense to totally revamp the origin story. I mean, look at the original Batman and look at Batman Begins. Obviously, totally different ones. Batman Begins being much closer to the original. The less we say about Spider-Man versus Amazing Spider-Man, the better, because those are basically, like, the first half is essentially identical, just with a different love interest in it, pretty much. But the movie does a lot of interesting setup for the character dynamics, for their histories, for the whole idea of, them teleporting to this other planet and this other dimension. And, there's a lot of early on after the incident happens, which, by the way, happens in a really, kind of ham-fisted way, the way that Ben Grimm is sort of stuck into there. I didn't think some of the details of the way that carried out made a lot of sense. It didn't seem like there was a lot of logic behind it. However, the first half of the film, while not amazing, was certainly decent. Not great, not fantastic, unfortunately, as the name might hope for, but definitely not terrible and not worthy of this kind of fan wrath that has been thrown onto it. The problem is that soon after the incident takes place, you get a very brief glimpse at them all sort of coming back, with their powers and sort of the scientists studying them, including, Dr. Storm, trying to figure out what happened to them on that trip. And then it just jumps ahead and skips over, and I said this in the review, skips over probably the best part of that journey, of this initial stage, would be, what would happen if you're going to really keep it grounded like Trank clearly wanted to do, and it was clearly his vision. Why would you skip over the part that would be, and he's mentioned on numerous occasions about his love for body horror films, The Fly and that kind of thing. Why would you skip over the part that would actually depict that? Why would you have all this build up, and it's a slow build up, getting everybody together and getting them on the trip there, and then they come back and then they're like, no, we need to test it out, and I don't know. It was all very, very ham-fistedly. I keep saying that because it just feels forced. Why would you skip over the part where you actually get to see these people who we've gotten to know for, roughly 45 minutes or however long it takes them to get the powers? When you want to see those real people that you've established waking up and being like, holy shit, my arms and legs are super stretched out, or I can't see my hands, or, I suddenly burst into flames, or I'm a rock monster. I mean, that's the stuff and the psychological effects of that would be interesting. to sort of explore in this movie. If you're going to take a totally different, realistic, science fiction-based approach to the material, that's sort of the meat of the story, at least in my eyes, should have been. Let alone the whole, Doctor Doom suddenly deciding that the whole Earth, the whole world needs to be destroyed, and all of a sudden not all of a sudden, because it skips over, spoilers, I guess. It skips over a year from the incident to when Doctor Doom ends up coming back and deciding that he has to protect, this other dimension, this other planet that he was on for a year. That was obviously a mess, and we'll get to that in a second. But the second act is where it starts to fall apart. Like all the way up to the incident, it's not great, but it's like you could sort of buy into it, being like, okay, I see where this is going. They're meeting here, they're studying this, blah blah blah. This guy relates to this guy this way and stuff. That's all good and fine if it's building to something, but it doesn't really ever build to something. That's the problem with the film. Michael B. Jordan's character, as I mentioned earlier, he's sort of set up as this rebel with a really high IQ and like super smart, but never does anything with it. We never really get to see that in action. He's just sort of, we're told that he's smart and that's why he's on this mission, I guess. But that's never explored. And I feel like most of the cast, they didn't really have anything to do because their characters weren't well defined enough. If they had taken more time to develop that middle section and them struggling with the powers and figuring out what the hell is happening to them, that kind of thing, then we would be able to see them in more emotional turmoil. And then, obviously there's conflict from there. And there's a lot of stuff in the film that they sort of set up, Ben blaming Reed for what happened and all of that. And they didn't really do much with it. Reed trying to find a cure and feeling guilty for what happened to his friends, that kind of thing. And then this whole third act with Doctor Doom and them having to come together, and the last 15 minutes especially is just painful to watch because suddenly they're all a team and they're all like, oh, this can't be cured. This is who we are. I'm like, since when? You haven't earned that turning point. We didn't see any of that. We saw you get the powers, then all of a sudden jump ahead, and then now you're a team of superheroes and you're going to save the world. And oh, what should they call us? Oh, I don't know. There's 4 of us. And like, oh, that's fantastic. Oh, what? What'd you say? Fantastic 4? Damn. Roll credits. It's like, it doesn't work that way. You have to establish that interconnectedness between the team before you get to that point. So that was my issue with that. That's my in a nutshell what my review kind of touches on, and you can check that out on crookedtable.com. Let me know what you guys think when you do get a chance to read that over. But there's a lot of evidence that the film that we saw was not what Josh Trank was intending to put out. I mean, he even tweeted this, and it's dated August 6th at 9:43 p.m. And of course, it was deleted soon after because Fox or somebody, probably his agent, probably saw it and it was like, pull this shit. So director Josh Trank said, "A year ago I had a fantastic version of this and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality though." So that to me lends tremendous weight to the fact that his vision was clearly compromised. I mean, you have a director who, based on interviews that I've heard, made Chronicle, which by the way is one of the few found footage movies that I've seen that I would actually vouch for. I think Cloverfield is good, and I think Chronicle is good, and from the ones that I've seen, and granted I haven't seen that many because I feel like that gimmick is really worn out, Chronicle is probably one of the best of that genre, and really sort of a standout superhero movie in general, especially considering that it's not based on any source material other than the screenplay. So the fact that he had handled the superhero genre so well before, and then is now basically disowning his movie, like, yeah, I don't want any part of that. You guys have at it because this was not what I wanted to put out. That leads me to believe that there was a lot of tension on set. I mean, there's been reports that Fox kicked him out of the editing room, and I mean, if you look at the trailers alone, there's a ton of footage in there that is nowhere to be seen in this movie. So, which would account for the jumps in time. I don't know if Fox was just like, yeah, we don't need all this like introspective, like reflective, struggling with my powers stuff. We'll cut all that shit out and jump right to, time to save the world, blue light in the sky, because apparently, if you look at the Marvel movies, that's what sells. I don't know if that was a bunch of material there and then Fox cut it out and just was like 1 year later on the screen. I don't know if that's what happened or what, but I mean, clearly there's a lot of material that was on the cutting room floor that knowing Fox's history with comic book properties, Trank is probably right. We probably will never see that, unfortunately. It reminds me a lot of the whole issue that Sam Raimi faced on Spider-Man 3 where, I don't know if it was Avi Arad. I think that's who I've read a lot was allegedly, credited with sort of being like, no, we want Venom in this. We want this whole thing. And kind of forcing him and Sony or Marvel and Sony, not Marvel Studios, mind you. I don't think so as much at that point because they weren't really their own entity yet. Marvel and Sony sort of pushing what they wanted in the movie onto Sam Raimi, which is why we have another mess of a superhero movie with 3 villains, essentially. Totally different issue. This issue was there was not so much like multiple subplots stuffed into the Fantastic Four movie. This issue was the middle of the story was sort of removed, essentially. Like you have all the build up, and then you have this tacked on little climax right at the end where they have this big showdown, I guess, that is over in like 45 seconds, I think. But the middle of the story where you actually get to know what's going on, it was all cut out. Sort of like the Daredevil movie, which, by the way, Daredevil, another Fox property, well, not anymore, but Daredevil, another Fox release, where they basically chopped up Mark Steven Johnson's original cut, which you could see the director's cut on DVD, which actually, as much as people hate on the Daredevil movie, and I'm not, in no way am I saying that the movie is better or anywhere near the quality of the show that's out on Netflix, but the director's cut basically explains the story that you didn't really get from the theatrical release of Daredevil. So this whole Fantastic Four debacle sort of reminds me of that, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. And, there's been a lot of reports of Josh Trank sort of being difficult to work with on the set. And, honestly, I wonder which came first. Him being difficult to work with and Fox being like, okay, this director is on an ego trip and then kicking him out and taking over the project. Or what I feel is probably more likely in this case, given the example that I just laid out, Fox coming in and taking over the project, thinking that they could sort of they would be able to mold it into something that would work better than what Josh Trank had in mind. And then Josh Trank being difficult on set because his vision is being fucked with. To me, that's probably the far more likely of the two. Again, I'm speculating here because it seems like I said, every few minutes I go on social media and there's another thing popping up like, new details on Fantastic Four. I mean, even recently, earlier today, Max Landis, writer of Chronicle, shared first 4 pages of his version of the script, which had a bunch of different other things in it, other elements that are not even in this film. So basically, this is where I stand on the now. The issue with the film as it stands. Now, the next thing is, looking forward, this film did not do very well at the box office this past weekend. It made $25.6 million against a production budget of, I believe, 120, something like that. 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. And yet somehow Fox still, I don't know if they still think this, but apparently Fox still thinks that they're going to put the sequel out in 2017. I don't know about that. In fact, reports are coming in that Fox is going to take a $60 million hit on this film. But of course, they're sticking to their story and, saying, we're still committed to this franchise, to these characters. Even though rumors are flooding in that the Fantastic Four sequel is going to be scrapped entirely for a Deadpool sequel, which, by the way, looks like it might actually be truer to that character than these than this film is, and actually, based on the fact that seems like they're going with an R rating for Deadpool, based on the Red Brand trailer, I don't see how they could do anything else. Looks like Fox is essentially trusting its people, its creative minds over at the X-Men world to sort of do their thing. But now, with Fantastic Four, they still trying to muck with it. I don't know it's hard for me to try and figure this out. I can't imagine Fox releasing a sequel to a film that nobody, relatively speaking, obviously, that nobody saw, that nobody liked, and that basically has its director being like, yeah, this is bullshit. I don't know what the fuck happened. They messed with my movie, and basically pulling a Joel Schumacher and being like, I'm sorry, this is not what I had in mind. Which makes me, if that is the case, as Trank is claiming, I feel bad for the guy, honestly, because I like I said, I really liked Chronicle, and I was excited initially to see his version of the Fantastic Four, and the fact that he may have had really good ideas for it, and there's some in here, like there's a whole subplot with Ben Grimm's and the Thing. There's a whole subplot in the middle of this movie that they allude to that I wanted to see more of that. I'm like, wow, that's kind of dark considering, what more, like, let's explore some of that and how that's been affecting him. The fact that Trank came into this project with allegedly, such enthusiasm and had his film twisted, again, allegedly, it's really kind of frustrating for him. And I wrote in my review, it's made the movie one of the most frustrating experiences for me to actually sit through, because I'm like, oh man, because this cast, this filmmaker, and these hints of interesting storytelling that are just dropped and then that are introduced and then dropped. It's like, no, we're not going to get to that. We're going to skip to the other formulaic bullshit, basically. But I can't see Fox putting out a sequel to this. I can only imagine that them saying they're still committed to it is really a reflection of them trying to figure out their shit behind the scenes before they make an announcement. To basically present a united front. Basically be like, no, we're still committed to this. We're good. Step off, Marvel, and all you fanboys being like, give Marvel control. Because of course, people have been saying this for years. People have been saying this about X-Men and Fantastic Four. But let's get real. Everybody that's still hating on the X-Men movies, I don't know what to tell you, because it's pretty clear that Fox is not letting that go at all anytime in the near future. We have 3 X-Men movies coming out next year. Deadpool and Gambit and then X-Men Apocalypse, all taking place, in the same universe. So do not get impatient waiting for Marvel to get the X-Men back, because that shit's not happening, at least not for a while. Fox is making a lot of money with that, and maybe 10 years from now, when by then they'll have a new Wolverine and they'll probably have rebooted the whole thing, then we'll see what happens and if that what they want to do with that. But Fantastic Four, shit, they're 0 for 3 essentially. Yes, those first 2 movies made money, and with that lighthearted tone, they could sort of get away with being silly and at least be enjoyable in a sort of a campy kind of way. I'm not saying that they're great movies, but I still think they tell their stories a little more coherently than this new one, because like I said, it's essentially 2/3 of a movie, more like half of a movie. So I don't know. I can't see a sequel coming out. So first thing, expect that sequel that's planned for 2017 to be dropped. I can't imagine that happening. Whether or not it turns into a Deadpool 2 or another X-Men movie or something else, that remains to be seen. But the thing here is, will Marvel get control back of the Fantastic Four? That's the big question that everybody's wondering all over the internet. Can Marvel and Fox come to an agreement where they either get Fantastic Four back, where Marvel and Fox are working together, as Marvel is doing with Sony for the Spider-Man movie? Exactly how is that going to break down? Because it's funny, right before Fantastic Four came out, reports were coming in about how Fox was still steadfast with that live-action X-Men TV show that they really want to do, and how they needed to work with Marvel, and I believe, to get the rights to that. if I was in Marvel's shoes, I would totally be using that shit as a bargaining chip to, if they want them to do, okay, basically being like, okay, you want to do an X-Men show, that's cool. Well, we want Fantastic Four back. And it's not just the Fantastic Four, because I could see some people being like, but Marvel can't save this, or give it a rest. We've had enough of that. Not another reboot like they're doing with Spider-Man. However, you also have to keep in mind with the Fantastic Four rights, they're not just getting Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm. They're also getting Doctor Doom, Silver Surfer, Galactus. Marvel is going to need more of these cosmic villains down the line because they're about to basically use up their Thanos card in a few years. So come Phase 4, they're going to need another big bad to sort of build up to. And there's not very many bads worse than or bigger than Doctor Doom. So, I mean, just for that and Silver Surfer and that alone, Galactus, I mean, shit, there's your Phase 4. Build it all around the Swallower of Worlds, I believe Galactus is called. Something to that effect. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. Like I said, I cannot imagine there being another Fantastic Four movie with Fox at this point, just because, I mean, I don't see a profit in it for them. I don't think that it's going to get better at this point. I mean, there's such a backlash behind this franchise. If this one didn't perform well, having come out of this film and heard all the negative buzz around this film, and it seems like all there is right now is negative buzz around this film, I can't imagine them willing to take another gamble and be like, bam, we're going to do it again. Let's do a sequel to this. I mean, I know they did Rise of the Silver Surfer after the 2005 Fantastic Four, but that was actually at least profitable and overseas and all that. It did decent business. Not, Avengers business, but hey, that's, we can't all be Avengers. That was a game changer for the industry and for the genre especially. But yeah, I don't know. My money's on them coming to some kind of deal with Marvel where they're either going to work with them or hand the rights over back to them completely. That's what I'm thinking. And if I'm Marvel, I'm eyeing that franchise, especially with the supporting characters behind it, because there's so much potential in there that hasn't really been tapped yet. And, eventually with Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Robert Downey Jr. probably either going to be like slipping off of the Avengers radar or back into more supporting roles. I'm thinking big picture, and I'm thinking you need to get in some of those other well-known characters like Doctor Doom and Galactus and Silver Surfer. You need to start lining them up for the next Phase 4, Phase 5, etc. Because if they want to keep this train rolling, they're going to need those characters eventually. And right now, Fox is probably frustrated enough with this franchise that they're willing to kind of fork it over. Not the X-Men, though. That's the thing. So all of you that I see on Twitter and Facebook being like, they should give over Fantastic Four and the X-Men. And like, that's not happening. They are whole clinging to that X-Men franchise for dear life. They don't even have Star Wars anymore, Fox. Okay? So they're like, that's their bread and butter. They will be making X-Men movies until the end of time. If they rushed another Fantastic Four movie into development 7 years after Rise of the Silver Surfer because they didn't want to lose the rights to that, trust me, they're going to keep some kind of X-Men movie going nonstop for the foreseeable future. So you guys can all just calm the hell down on that. Especially if they want to start branching into TV. So anyway, that's what I had to say about the whole Fantastic Four thing. I just thought this was a good opportunity to throw up a little bit of a shorter podcast, especially compared to the last one, and kind of comment and give you guys a little bit of my feedback on the film and what the future might hold for the Fantastic Four and the whole Marvel Fox dynamic. So, but I really want to hear what you guys have to say. So send me a tweet at Crooked Table, or, reach out to me on Facebook. You can find our Crooked Table Facebook page there. Go on the site, read the review, let me know what you guys think. Do you think that Fox and Marvel can come to an agreement? I mean, I know there's a lot of animosity between both sides, with Marvel's basically sort of cutting off any promotion for the Fox characters, for the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, and canceling the Fantastic Four comic book. Do you think that Marvel has any interest in the Fantastic Four property to begin with? Send me a tweet at Crooked Table. Let me know what you think is going to happen to Fantastic Four. And I'm actually trying to work on more stuff with the podcast, trying to bring some new people on and get more topics covered. So if you guys have any suggestions, be sure to reach out to me with that. And until next time, that's all I got. Thanks for listening. Roll credits. Hi, this is Tom Cruise. I just wanted to say, if you haven't seen my new movie, Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, check it out. It's much better than Fantastic Four. It's amazing. Seriously, Tom, get out of here. Okay. And stop yelling. Sorry.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
The art of a little KED.